It's the 26th of January, 2018, and this is episode 87 of the Unseen Podcast. Joining me in this episode, we have a special guest, Paul Hildebrandt. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
And a couple of the usual suspects, Mike Mongo.
Wait a minute. Wait. Paul Hildebrandt, director of Fight for Space, and the upcoming First to the Moon. I get that, but I am one of the regular. What was it? Usual suspects.
Hello, Mike. How are you this evening? And Jon Eckberg, returning for the second time.
I'm an unseen suspect. This is my first repeat offense, so go easy on me.
All right. Now, Mike, this was your idea to bring Paul on and talk about kids in space, which is even slightly more interesting than pigs in space. So why don't you kick us off? What do you think is interesting about that, and also tell us a bit more about our special guest, and let him take off and talk what he wants to talk about.
All right. So as you know, as maybe not the people who are listening know, we set up these shows a couple weeks in advance, even sometimes a few weeks in advance, and we come up with ideas about what we want to talk about and what we can talk about. Sometimes it's topical, and sometimes it's things we know about. Since I'm an astronaut teacher, and I go around and I encourage students to pursue careers in space and astronautics. That's my whole gig, and I'm working on a new thing called Astronaut Job Fair, which is a touring event version of that. I propose that we talk about this thing that I talk about all the time, which is kids in space.
Kids in space. Okay.
No, so it goes kids in space. There you go. That's what everybody's waiting for. Yeah, that.
All right.
And the amazing thing
with music with blaring in the background. Yes. Okay.
You'll have to do the music. And so the great thing about that is that when I talk about it with kids, they all get excited about it. And then when I talk about it with grownups, all the grownups get in a panic about it, or how it's just not going to happen, or it doesn't make sense, or it's impractical. And one of the conversations I have with grownups about kids going to space is that there's going to be pretty soon a first kid in space. Well, Paul, who's a friend of mine, and we've known each other for a few years, he's got a new project coming out called First to the Moon. And it's about the first flight around the moon. And there's a parallel here, and how when we have these firsts in space, like first person in space, Yuri Gagarin, Yuri's night's coming up, by the way. And these moments, they inspire humankind, and they inspire us to pursue greatness and to do these amazing things. And so there's a parallel between kids in space and the first human beings in space and the first people to go around the moon. There's many of these parallels, and they produce forward motion for space exploration. And that's why when Paul and I were talking, I said, "Hey, Paul Hildebrandt, how about being on Unseen Podcast?" And then what did you say, Paul?
So it sounds fun.
And here we are. So, and I haven't talked with, and Paul Carr, I haven't spoke with Jon. Jon, what's your last name?
Eckberg, just like iceberg.
Jon Eckberg. And how did you get hooked up with the Unseen Podcast?
God, I don't even remember. I was just trolling Google Plus for interesting posters, and discovered Paul Carr, and then wandered on to his intake for the podcast, and here I am.
Wait a minute. So you are one of the handful of people that use Google Plus as a social platform?
One of the proud few. Thank you.
That's amazing. So that's actually,
well,
I would put, go ahead.
You have to remember that Eric S. Raymond, who's a Linux hero, is on Google Plus.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not.
I'm sure you disagree with Eric on probably almost everything, but still.
I'm a Linus Torvalds fan myself.
He's on there too. He's a poster.
On Google Plus?
Yeah, look him up.
It all started with Android, but that's a long story. I don't think we want to go down that path.
I was there. I'm 52. So the idea about sending kids to space is that for me, the reason I advocate and push for it is because I am a proponent of kids going to space, because that will move humanity to space. When kids go to space, humanity is actually in space. And more than that is that when kids go to space, all the kids in the world, when the first kids go to space, all the kids in the world are going to be inspired to be the next kids in space. And it will engender a next space motion or space program, another space age. Yes.
Okay, well, let me ask. Okay, Mike, that sounds good at the abstract level. Let's talk about some of the objections you're going to hit with that. I mean, I looked it up recently. There were 31 children on the Mayflower. So it's not like people traditionally have been afraid to bring their children into high-risk adventures. They don't. And there have been, but in this day and age, do you really think that, how are we going to get past those hurdles of you're putting your child at too much risk in this age of helicopter parenting and drug abuse resistance education and all that, that really the tendency to watch over children as if they were delicate flowers.
Well, I mean, children are to be watched over. That's our job as grown-ups. That's the whole, we are responsible for that. And we are to be the best peer and parent and mentor and grown-up that we can be. And in many circumstances, Paul, there are young people, students, kids that want to go further than their peers.
Yeah.
I don't know if do you remember Jessica Dubroff, the 7-year-old pilot who died?
No.
She it was maybe 10 years ago, and she wanted to be the youngest person to fly across the continental United States. And she went up and she was flying to a event with her dad and a friend, and some sort of wind thing happened, a wind event, and she and her dad died in the plane. And the people started to turn on the mom, saying how irresponsible of you to allow this child to fly. And the mom had, you can look it up. The story is pretty well known. The mom had the most beautiful response. She said, "I will miss my daughter for the rest of my life, but there is no way that you can tell me that I should not have let her fly, because nothing brought her greater joy than piloting." And that is how it is for, do you know who Alyssa Carson is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so she's 16 now. She's been working to get to Mars since she was 5. She's been training to be an astronaut since she was 5. And she speaks 4 languages fluently. She speaks English, Spanish, French, and Chinese exceptionally well. And she plays soccer. And she's a alumni of the space camp. She teaches at space camp. She's been to all the NASA facilities. She has her NASA passport stamped at every NASA facility on the planet. And she has worked to accomplish all these by fundraising and grants, and she does the extra labor to do this stuff. She's not born with a silver spoon, nothing like that. And she's a regular girl. She's a girl. She's just a regular girl. She likes to do regular girl things, who also wants to be an astronaut more than anything in the entire world. And not just any astronaut. She wants to be the first person to step foot on Mars. And so her dad is not a big Mars head. He is, because she is. Her dad knows a lot about space because she knows a lot about space. But he is sold on it. He's whatever she wanted to do is what he's going to back her on. He's that kind of parent. And that's I'm not saying just put a ticket in a candy bar. This is not a golden ticket kind of situation. There are kids out there who have earned the right to have the opportunity to be the first kids in space. And I believe that they should be granted that right. And not only that, this is important. I'm speaking from a U.S. perspective, but there's a broader perspective. Like if you include France, India, England, Russia, well, France, India, Russia, and China. Those are the ones really with launch facilities, capabilities. Those, particularly China and Russia, somebody's going to send kids to space because it is the first kids in space, whatever nation they come from, are going to inspire the children of that nation. It's going to be the biggest STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, excuse me, mechanics, mathematics.
Oh, let's make it mechanics.
It could just be marvelous.
Could be marvelous.
Science, technology, engineering, arts, and marvelous. It'll be the biggest STEM incentivizer that has ever happened for kids since we sent since Neil Armstrong, since Yuri Gagarin. Hey, Paul Hildebrandt, how do you pronounce Valentina's last name?
I'm not sure.
Really? I thought you would know.
I'm not an expert on the Soviet space program.
But you know a lot. You know a lot about space.
Not much about Russian space, though.
Oh yeah. Valentina. Doing it. A podcast. Tereshkova. I mean,
Tereshkova, yeah. Okay. That sounds right.
Valentina Tereshkova. 1963, the Soviets sent an astronaut up who was a woman. And that was a major event for people for women, particularly at the time the Soviet Union, and also in Cuba, and in communist countries. And when did the U.S. send up the first person, Sally Ride? 81, 80.
It was in the early 80s, yeah.
Yeah, so 63 to 82, I think it was. I could be wrong. Googling it.
I remember working that launch that she went up in.
Wow.
We had a satellite on board.
So that's why, I mean, we can get into the reasons why we shouldn't send kids to space. When I am in classrooms and I travel all over in and outside the United States, and I'm in whole classrooms every day to encourage students to pursue careers in astronautics. And one of the things that I say is this is an amazing small bit, a piece. And I say it to these kids, and they respond to it the same in every classroom, no matter what country I'm in. I say, I am going to tell you something that no grown-up has ever told you before. And they know I'm talking about astronautics. So that's the preface. I say, I'm going to tell you something that no grown-up has ever told you before. And they're on their edge of the seats already. And I say, there has never been a kid in space. And they lose their minds. Like, they jump out of their seats, they slap the tables, they scream, they smack their foreheads, they clap. It is a big deal. And it's such a big deal that after I say that in the classrooms, and after after the teaching is over, I regroup with the regular teacher, they almost always comment on it, about how funny it is, how exuberant, how overreactive the students were to that particular comment. And and it's kids want to go to space. And it's our obligation to, like, one of the reasons we go to space is for the inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for the science. It's not just for the potential breakthroughs in commerce and technology and medicine and energy. It is for the inspiration to go on and do more great things. But there's another reason too. You see, when we see astronauts and they're in the International Space Station and they're doing stuff like putting M&Ms in floating balls of water or fruit juice or whatever, every one of us is here on Earth thinking, oh my God, that looks like fun. And as cool as we think we are as grown-ups, nobody is better at having fun than kids. So, like I said, it's not just any kids. It's kids who have worked for it and have earned the right to be given the opportunity for consideration to go to space. There are these kids now. They're doing it.
Okay.
There's kids who drag race. There's kids who pilot.
Well, let's talk about a scenario where that would happen.
Where kids would go to space?
Yeah. Can we come up with a design reference mission here? It can't just be the purpose of this is to put a kid in space, right? There's got to be something else, right? Like maybe there's already a colony of adults living on the moon. Maybe 20.
So
30,
that's the scenario.
40. And mommy and daddy are on the moon and they want their 8-year-old to join them. Something like that? Or is it something else?
Well, I mean, I got three top thinkers right here. So you guys have any ideas about why we would send kids to space? If it's not just to send kids to space? I mean, other than a comet is about to hit the Earth or an asteroid is about to hit the Earth and we have to move humanity to space, or else we will.
That would hopefully is not the scenario, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the objective to sending kids in space would be part of a larger program. You've got to have a colonization program. So when we finally do start going back to the moon and building things there, then we send the kids to the moon and they can start.
Do we send the kids to the moon or are the kids born there?
Well, probably, maybe both.
I mean, somebody was just saying, some famous science person was saying that within, I think it was 20 years, we'll be having children on the moon. I saw that on Twitter. And I think that's a stretch.
It's certainly plausible.
Yeah, but
I mean, we could have the first pregnancy on the moon in 3 years if we wanted it. If we wanted it real bad enough. It's just there's no funding to send people to the moon right now.
It also seems much more likely that rather than prioritizing childbearing on the moon, the priority will be to avoid any childbearing on space or in some other celestial body, partly because of the risk involved. And we all know that national space agencies are strongly risk averse, and partly because of the inevitable controversy that would arise.
Well, some national space agencies are risk averse. Some are less so. And
wait a minute, Nick Nielsen has joined the podcast. When did that happen?
About 5 minutes ago.
He snuck in the back door. I have no idea.
The podcast has a back door?
No, it doesn't. He must have made one.
It's the unseen back door.
It is.
I found a link. I found the link and got in.
Awesome. Welcome to the podcast.
Sometimes when I hit reply all, I'm not sure who's on the other end.
Right? Yeah. That's cool. So I didn't mean to steer away from your point. Please, we restate that again, Nick.
I said I think that Well, Paul said that there could be a child bearing on the moon in 3 years, and yeah, there could. I mean, you could shoot a pregnant woman up into space, and she could have a child in space sooner than 3 years. But not only does I think that will not be prioritized, I think the people who are in charge of the programs would prioritize an avoidance of this until everybody is quite sure that things won't go wrong. Because if you think of it as a program, as part of a larger program, as was just mentioned, just like when the Reagan administration wanted to put a teacher up into space, so they held a big contest, and Christa McAluliffe won, and of course she was so unfortunate as to be on the shuttle that exploded when it took off, and so that was a disaster for teachers in space, obviously. And no one in any space program, no matter how open they are to risk, wants to revisit that possibility, and especially not with a child who is not yet of legal age to consent to something like this.
In the United States.
In the United States.
That's true. I think that you could have a Chinese child or an Indian child who might very well.
I think India is probably on the closer to the U.S. side of children, estimation of children, how we feel about children, whereas Russia and China, children that went up in space and died would be national heroes.
True.
And so they are, I would think, willing to make that sacrifice. That gives both those nations a critical competitive advantage in this context.
Yeah. I think the more likely scenario for the first child in space is an unplanned pregnancy on the moon or Mars. We're not ready for that, no, but we won't be until it happens. So, it's like nobody's ready to be a parent till they become one. So,
okay. So I think that's strictly speaking from the U.S. perspective again. I really think I am of the opinion that a nation such as China or Russia is already planning to put kids in space just because of the effect it would have on the ambition of the nation.
Yeah, you might be right on that.
Yeah, I have very little insight into the Chinese program. I have worked with Long March launchers before in my past life, and I did see a remarkable lack of risk aversion in some cases there that I won't go into in any detail, but I think you probably know, some of you know the story, but so yeah, I mean, I can believe China, although so far they have shown what they have shown in their human space program has been a very conservative approach. I don't think they're not blowing through it like Apollo, like we did with Apollo, and I really I don't know. I don't understand their culture well enough to tell you how much a death of an astronaut would affect their plans. If the answer is that it wouldn't affect them at all, then you have to consider, well, okay, you got to look at the shuttle program, which was probably the most highly vetted safety program that had ever existed, and we still lost 14 astronauts in two of the roughly 100 launches. People are
opinions vary on the matter, Paul.
Say again.
Describing the space shuttle as safe. Opinions vary widely on that matter.
Well, I know, but in terms of the amount of effort and intense scrutiny that went into trying to make it safe, I'm sure the amount of money spent would dwarf anything else that's ever happened, including Apollo.
Absolutely.
The bureaucracy in Houston that has now transferred to the space station for the most part, was enormous. To get anything to happen, you had to jump through a lot of hoops. the safety documentation would read from the top of the table to the ceiling. So I agree with Mike. I think we're far too risk averse to ever do that here. It would be considered an unnecessary stunt, and would be it would be Congress critters all red-faced on television, getting excited and nervous about it. It would never happen.
Well, the opportunity that we have in the U.S. for this is the private space companies, and there's a similar risk aversion, specifically because like everybody loves kids, no question, and it's a commerce issue. If you blow up kids in a spaceship, people are not going to fly on your. Well,
if you blow up anybody in space, but people have been killed on commercial airline flights, and it didn't end commercial airline flights. In fact, ticket sales hardly drop off at all.
Okay, but that's with that's now. That's not okay. But it's interesting you should bring this up, because when I bring up the thing about there's never been a kid in space, 2 kids, and they get excited, and then I talk about it afterwards in the classroom when the students have left with the other educators, and then when I was doing this, I would bring up why don't we send kids to space? Because the teachers would comment on how funny it is that we don't send how funny it is how the students were so overreactive to that statement. And these are 8 to 12-year-olds, but younger or older, and but 8 to 12 and younger, really. And then I rhetorically would ask, well, when did the first kids fly in an airplane, like you're saying? And it was just when did the first kids fly an airplane? And I actually researched it, because I had asked it so many times that I started to wonder, well, when did the first kids fly in an airplane? And did you know that it's not on the internet? It wasn't anywhere. It wasn't. And so what happened was, I've got friends who are familiar with the Wright brothers logs. They kept meticulous logs, and I began querying, and a friend of mine in France who has access to the Wright brothers did the flight in Kitty Hawk in 1905, and then they spent 3 years working on the patents, and then they did their first public flight at Le Mans, and that was in September of that was in October of 1908. Well, like I said, that was the first public. After they got the credit, everybody was saying the Wright brothers have flown, big news, but no one had seen it. It was at Kitty Hawk. 5 people were there. They went in hiding for 3 years, getting all the patents together. They get invited to Le Mans to do a public display, but in October, but in September, in Fort Myers, Florida, they did a private flight for the U.S. military to demonstrate that it works. And in doing that, the person they brought up from the military died. The plane crashed, and his name's Thomas Selfridge, and he died. And the military bought the plane anyway. And then 3 weeks later, they fly to Le Mans for the first public display of the airplane. And there was an inventor. I can't remember his name. He invited them to France to do this demonstration. 3 weeks after the first person is killed in an airplane, Leon Bolet, a French inventor, invited the Wright brothers to Le Mans to demonstrate the airplane. 3 weeks after the very first person is killed in an airplane crash, and on that same day, according to the flight logs, the very first child, an 11-year-old named Andreas Nikolopoulos, Greek French, flew in an airplane 4 minutes and 19 seconds. 3 weeks after the first person has been killed in an airplane. We've been flying to space for 50 years. It's time to put a kid in space.
Okay, but that doesn't change my question, though.
Go ahead.
What's the scenario where that happens?
Okay, so that's what you were talking about is, we fly people to space and people die and we keep on flying people to space. So the previous thing, what you were saying is, what's the scenario? So the best scenario I can think of is that, like, there are so many for the U.S. to pull it off, there has to be some sort of political motivation to make it happen. And if another nation is sending kids to space, that is definitely motivation to do that.
Okay,
That's one of those things.
Somebody else will do it first. So you're saying?
No, not necessarily first. Somebody else is doing it or thinking about it.
Okay.
And this is a weird thing because, if you follow me on Twitter, everybody knows my politics. But because of the radical nature of the modern U.S. leadership, this is one of those moments where somebody could come up with some idea like this and pitch it, and they would say, "Oh, that's a great idea. We're going to inspire the world." And so you say, here's the scenario: some person talks Donald Trump into sending kids to space being a good idea, and we send kids to space. There you go. You just need me, like any scenario. There's a scenario.
I'll give you a scenario I think is a little more likely than that.
Good.
Which is a family vacation on Virgin Galactic. I think if you have a biological mother, biological father with their biological child, three of them going up together in one of the Virgin Galactic shots where they can take several people up at the same time. I know that's suborbital, but it would be a step.
Okay, so to that point, Richard Branson has said that on the first flight he's going to bring his grandchildren.
Well, there you go.
So now the interesting thing about that is it doesn't work the same way. They get the credit for being the first kid, but that's a silver spoon kid.
And Virgin Galactic's not really going to space.
Yeah, it's suborbital, but and also they would have to be a very wealthy couple of parents to take their child into a trip like that. But
it's not going to be a kid who grew up in poverty. Let's face it.
No, I mean, I just want the best kid, like to go up to space on Virgin Galactic or any of these space tourism rides. It's not the same as being an astronaut.
But tourism may turn out to be the killer app. It may be, we don't know, but that may be it.
Can I butt in real quick?
Sure.
Paul Hildebrandt.
I think the solution here to what you want, Mike, is we have to work on making space more affordable and more frequent. And when that happens, the kids will go naturally. I think trying to send we can't even send our own people into space right now. I remind everybody, we have no launch vehicle that can carry people at the moment. So when we do, and when we start doing it more and more frequently and cheaper, then the kids will go. We need to meet that objective first.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. Thank you. That it's got to be more routine for the adults before they will start taking kids. Right. And right now, as Paul just pointed out, all the astronauts the U.S. astronauts that go into space go on a Russian rocket.
But that's partly a function of risk aversion because the equipment does exist in the U.S. You've got Falcon rockets and you've got the Dragon capsule. You could put them together and shoot them up. They haven't been approved yet. That's true.
Well, until if they're not approved, they're not going to fly. So,
Okay, but look at it this way. Mike just brought up this example from more than 100 years ago, 1908, an 11-year-old child. And by the way, Mike, thanks for the history lesson. That was all new to me. That was great.
Thank you.
If 100 years ago, no one would have thought twice about, have you met the regulations? Is everybody wearing their safety helmets? Have you signed your your triplicate waivers of anything going wrong? We live in a different world now. In 2018, 110 years later, that bureaucratic stuff is enough to put the kibosh on just about anything, even if it's a great idea. So we have the hardware in the United States that could do it. Could probably do it within a few days if people had a will to it. But the bureaucratic will is apparently stronger than the will to mark a new achievement, like a kid in space.
Well, it started with on which the anniversary of is tomorrow. The Apollo 1 fire was the first big accident, and NASA and North American they got sloppy, and they missed some things, and those astronauts were killed. And then it happened 2 more times. Again, it's making it more frequent and cheaper, and it'll happen.
Hey, Mike, I want to say that I think this is a great concept for getting kids interested in space. I think we all appreciate what you're doing here. We have some questions, technical issues, and I don't know. I'm guessing there's a few parents in the panel. I don't really know, but I have 2 sons, and I know they would absolutely love to go to space, but they'd also probably love to get in a few other situations that might, adversely influence their development and continuation as humans. So,
yeah.
But as a concept to bring kids in terms of their interest and their excitement, you're down in Key West. My own interest in space, I grew up as a space shuttle was kind of starting to go up for the first few times. And my dad took me down to see Discovery's launch. I think it was 1984. And we drove around the peninsula a little bit. I don't think we got down to Key West, but, a shuttle launch and a trip around Kennedy Space Center when you're 8 years old is going to make anybody, a fanatic about space, which I still am, basically.
I love your dad.
I think we all, in terms of wanting to cross-examine your idea rhetorically and kind of shake it out for what it is exactly you mean, I know that we all probably appreciate what you're trying to do with it.
Okay, so now, Jon, here's the thing: if either of your 2 sons or both of them just wanted to go to space more than anything, like it was their driving passion, and they pursued it diligently, like with integrity, not just as a lark or a fluke or as a whim, but something that year in, year out, that this was the prize that their eyes were on. Would you, as a parent, do everything in your power to facilitate and foster that dream?
Let's see. So right now they're 5 and 4.
Right.
So no.
I mean, I get it, 5 and 4, and boys are different than girls, but I do know for sure that Alyssa Carson was sitting in, like, I know the whole story. I interviewed her. She wrote the opening, the introduction to my book, The Astronaut Instruction Manual. The reason she wrote that is because I wanted to make sure that this wasn't just some showbiz kid, some kid that the parent was pushing to go to space. I wanted to make sure she was the real deal. And her dad laughed the entire time I was pursuing this. I wanted it validated. And he said, watch. This is not me. This is her. And
it's not obvious to me that anybody here is philosophically opposed to what you're doing.
Sure.
But, in some ways, by applying some skepticism to your arguments, we're trying to make you stronger.
Oh, absolutely. And I got to tell you, so here's the thing, Jon. I've been doing this. And I love this conversation. Absolutely. I've been doing this for 10 years now. This specific thing, talking with students, encouraging students to pursue careers in space and astronautics, talking with grown-ups about encouraging students, talking about the opportunity of kids in space. So it's something that I'm very comfortable with. And people bring up, like, for a real challenge, a physiological challenge of kids going to space, is that our bodies over time, as we grow up, harden to radiation. It happens. But when we're new, when we're fresh, when we're kids, our bodies are not hardened to radiation. We're not physiologically hardened to radiation. And kids, by going to space, are a lot more vulnerable to radiation than grown-ups are. That's reality.
Yeah, no, you just read my mind, because I was going to throw at you the rhetoric. Now that I've established that we're friendly and we like your idea, it just has some technical issues. We're going to throw the rhetoric at you. And what if it was my kid's desire to go play in the Fukushima reactor? Okay.
Then maybe something would be, but that's irrational. So give me another example.
Well, it's not irrational. I mean, there's work that needs to be done in Fukushima. And if they're very excited about the concept of radioactivity and producing energy and all the useful aspects of being in a highly radioactive environment, then is that something I should support? Or should there be a national contest to see who can support the first 10-year-old to go in and work in a radioactive vessel?
You have to give me a better example.
Well, I think what he's trying to get at, there's a not a bright line, but there's a threshold below which the risk is acceptable. Now, John, you admit no adult wants to go in there, right? If they do, it's with a great understanding that they're accepting a lot of risk themselves.
Most adults aren't going out of their way to go into space either.
Well,
yeah, but there are thousands and thousands of adults that would happen to.
But an example would be swimming with sharks. Most grown-ups would not swim with sharks or want to swim with sharks. But there's plenty of grown-ups who do and would like to swim with sharks. I mean, we talked about that earlier. I've swum with sharks a lot over the course of my life. And there are I particularly did it when I was younger. And there are young people that do not mind swimming with sharks. And they actually seek out the experience. Now, a parent has a responsibility to present the safest expression of that desire, the most logically safe, practically safe, this kind of thing. Like something that, okay, so how can I enable this for my young person so they grow up? And I mean, my friend was Rob Stewart. He did the movie Sharkwater, and he died at 32. And he died doing what he loved doing. He was swimming with sharks. The suit malfunctioned, and that was it. But his family and friends, they love him dearly. And albeit he's 32, but I'm 52, and 32 is kind of a kid. And he was doing it since he was 24, and he could have, or 22 really. He could have died at 22, but he kept on doing what he did. And there is definitely a difference between a 10-year-old and a 22-year-old and a 32-year-old and a 52-year-old. I get all that. But I definitely know plenty of grown-ups who don't have any idea what they want to do or have never pursued a goal with diligence and integrity. And then there's these students that I meet that I'm blessed to know, and they go after it like it was the meaning of life. And we as grown-ups, we would love to have that same sort of drive and passion. If we don't, I happen to. And I imagine a number of people on this call do as well, on this podcast.
Oh yeah, I remember when Challenger went down. You mentioned that earlier when Christa McAuliffe died and with 6 other astronauts.
86, January 28th.
Yeah, I remember it well.
Me too.
I'm sure if you polled most of the people I knew at the time and said, "Would you go up on the next flight?" they would all raise their hands. Yeah, I mean, there are, it may not be the majority, but there's millions of people who want to go.
I mean, I was just at a space conference and they asked the room, if you had the opportunity to go to, and these are space science professionals, if you had the opportunity to go to Mars and there's only a 50% chance of making it, a show of hands, how many people would go? And half the room said yes. I was not of that half. That's not my goal. That's not my drive. I don't have that dream. That's going to Mars might be cool, but I'm not willing to that's not my odds. I wouldn't even, I want to go to the moon like other people want to go to Mars, but I'm going to work harder than 50%. So I don't want to throw kids to the wolves. That's not the goal here. And it's not an arbitrary or random thing. I am stating so that we're all clear on this, that there are students that, one, are doing the work necessary to get the respect that earns them the opportunity to possibly go to space. That's really important. And two, we're technologically capable of providing that opportunity. Doing this for 50, it's time. It's the next, I don't just think of space as a place to visit and have fun. I think of space as where we solve all the challenges, where we discover how to solve for all the challenges we face on Earth today. We solve for inclusion, diversity. We solve for sustainability. We solve for energy. We solve for health. We solve for the illusion of scarcity.
Can I bring in some I like to ask myself, what would Jean-Luc Picard do? This guy, I know Paul Hildebrandt's with me. I saw that spaceship, buddy. Okay. But maybe you're more of a Riker guy, because that had 3 nacelles. So we'll talk about that later.
He looks like a Riker.
You'd think a Riker fan would have more of a beard, but anyway, that was a long time ago. It was a long time ago.
That's first season of Riker.
So if we're bringing Picard into it, Picard is the absolute, he's the captain. He's the steward of a ship full of children. And I'm not just talking about his crew. I'm saying, the saucer section had families, but that's in a circumstance where they have a stable society. All the kids are well fed. They have good nutrition. They have access to medical supplies. They have probably about 1 G of acceleration, radiation shielding. Basically space in that context is just an apartment complex here on Earth. And so in that case, kids, Paul had a good example of the Mayflower. Kids are going to be sucked into the wake of every human endeavor that ever comes. And they always have been, and they always will be, or there won't be any more humans ever again. So, it's going to happen at some point. But, coming back to your point, Mike, with the Wright brothers, we're not in the Federation phase of space flight here on Earth. We're in the barnstorming phase. And that is where you have, wackadoos who know how to fly. They're taking their planes here and there and taking people on quick rides and flying through barns and probably doing dangerous stunts to excite a crowd. I don't know if we have the demographics for the barnstorming era, but I'm pretty sure that planes crashed and killed, the passengers that were on board for fun, including children. I mean, this happens routinely. Some guy has a Cessna in 100 hours and he wants to take, his nephews up in the plane, and they crash and they all die. So this is just a aspect of living in a technical society where we can go fast enough that our bodies can't survive a quick stop. So yeah, I totally agree that kids are going to go to space and they're going to be in space. But I guess the question is, how do we get there from here?
I think that's the question I've been trying to get to. Yeah. We don't need the polemics
So
of why we want to do it. We just need to know how it's going to happen.
Okay, so and well, this is I mean I tussle with this all the time. There was it's not really clear on who the first person who is a woman to have flown in an airplane, the first woman pilot is. But there's a woman named Blanche Scott who became a well-known aviator, and she was in an airplane riding around a track, and because she was somewhere where there was an airplane, and they had it blocked off so that the plane couldn't. They had a wood block on the throttle somehow, so that the plane couldn't lift up, and the plane accidentally lifted off the ground, and she was the kind of individual. Like whenever I read the story, I always saw that the word accidentally was put in quotation marks. And the very first pilots who are women have always acknowledged Blanche Scott. Like the very first, like right after this happened, they said, I'm like I said, there's some discussion about which person is the actual first, but they have always acknowledged that no, it was actually Blanche Scott. Now, I mentioned that because that's an opportunity. How the first kid, that's an opportunity. Like, who was the astronaut that just passed recently who brought the corned beef sandwich up to space?
Jack Young?
John Young?
John Young.
Yes.
Yeah.
Smuggle the corned beef sandwich. And I'm not saying a kid is a corned beef sandwich. But
my kids are, but go ahead.
And then you mentioned another really interesting aspect of this, John, and that is that children of like bringing your own kids to space. I think you just referenced that, and the first child to fly in space was Andreas Nikolopoulos, 11 in 1908, but the next kid to fly in space was in 1910. And
in a plane.
In a plane. Thank you. Yeah. You're on a plane. The first kid to fly in an airplane was in 1908, Andreas Nikolopoulos, age 11. But the next kid to fly in an airplane was in 1910. And I found that because I watched an interview of Leonette Wright, the Wright brothers' niece, and Leontine, and she and her sister wrote a letter to their uncle Orville and said, "We know that a boy has flown an airplane in Europe, but I would like to be the first kid in America to fly in an airplane." And then he surprised her, showed up in Ohio, invited him to the field, and then brought him out to the field just to see the flight, and then said, "Guess what? You're flying today." And she became the first American child to fly in an airplane. She became the first actual girl, not woman, but girl, to fly in an airplane. And it was because her uncle invented the airplane, her uncles. And so that's another possible scenario. That was a good call, John. I mean, like that's a real thing. So, vis-a-vis this Richard Branson saying, "I'll bring my grandchildren up, but it's going to be so safe." There's something to be said for being in the right place at the right time. If there's kids out there today that want to, this is another thing I tell kids all the time. If you want to go to space, if you want to be that first kid in space, then write letters, send emails, tweet, make videos. Have your mom or your teacher write a letter and say why you deserve, why you have earned the right to be considered for this opportunity. And the thing about it is that there's reality to this. one of the famous lines I had always heard was 90%. Oh, Story Musgrave. He said 90% of success is showing up.
Was that Woody Allen?
90.
I thought that was Woody Allen.
It is attributed to Woody Allen, but Story says he said it.
Oh, well, then it must be true. Okay.
And so he phrases it a slightly different way. 90% of success is being in the right place at the right time, something like that. And it has to do with, if this is something that you want, if this is something you want to go after, like, don't just say that you want to do it. And this is more that I speak to the students as opposed to the grownups. And here's another thing. This is really important. It is not my job to convince grownups that sending kids to space is a good idea. I'm doing everything in my power as a grownup to convert other grownups to the cause. But what I'm doing is talking with students, and they know it's a good idea. They get it. And so a lot of these students, all they need from me as a grownup, not as Mike Mongo, but just as some grownup figure, is the permission to imagine themselves pursuing this role, this goal. All they need to hear, and that's what it's like I'm playing the odds. Every classroom I go into, maybe this is the class with that kid. And maybe this is the class with that teacher that is the right teacher for this kid. And maybe this is the class with the right teacher who's with the right kid who has the right parent or mentor or guardian around them. And then they go and do this thing while all of us grownups are having this discussion about whether or not kids should or should not go to space. Kids are working to go to space. And that's the thing that we as grownups need to take away from this particular conversation, is that do not doubt for 1 second that while we are busy talking about it, that there are kids out there working at it right now.
Oh, I believe you. In fact, I've seen quite a few of them on social media. And not all American kids either. A lot of them are from other places.
Arab, Indian. I see a lot of kids who are Arab, a lot of kids who are Indian.
And that's just the ones
But
I guess in English. Yeah, there can be many others.
One of the things going on right now is that, as a species, as a culture, as a society, however you want to glob all the human beings on the planet together, the emphasis is going more into entering this sort of digital realm. There's a lot more focus on what's going on, on social media and on our cell phones, as opposed to looking through a telescope, going for a jog, going scuba diving, whatnot. So the kind of things we got interested in, around the Apollo or the space shuttle era, aren't the kind of same things that kids are really into now. It's just sort of.
I'm going to argue that point, John. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, and yeah, you're gonna have kids who want to go to space. Always.
GoPro.
That's always been sort of, you look at the wish fulfillment movies out there, and you got, movies from the 80s like Explorers, where, 3 kids build a spaceship out of garbage cans and some, semi-magical technical device, and they go up into space for a little bit. Or Zathura, or, there was some movie, I don't remember what it was called, but I saw it when I was really young, and some kids snuck on an Apollo spaceship and went to the moon with them. I don't know what that was called.
I remember that one too, yeah. Which is my fantasy during the actual Apollo mission, but
yeah, and it was a good thing he was there because he saved the whole mission. They all would have died without him.
Oh yeah,
so
of course.
Ultimate wish fulfillment was
stow away to the moon.
Yeah,
right.
I love
that. Was
that.
it. Yeah.
Lloyd Bridges.
So this is a powerful theme for kids in that you basically, actual astronauts. You brought up Story Musgrave. I think, doesn't he have like 5 master's degrees or something? Like, for his whole life, he was a tireless, curious individual. And I'm not saying the master's degree is the the penultimate in human
I think
endeavors.
he's got an MD as well.
I'm just saying that. Oh yeah, that's right. He's a medical doctor. Yeah. So he's, to be the kind of individual that should go to space, from a pure philosophical point of view, not from a governmental or bureaucratic point of view. It takes a lot of work and focus, and maybe almost an unhealthy level of obsession and drive. And I don't kind of society that supports that sort of individual development.
But Mike was mentioning that earlier when he talked about young children who were very focused on the idea, and it's a self-selective process. Every few years you hear a news story. This is a related thing, by the way. Every few years you hear a news story about a young person who wants to be the youngest person to do such and such. And the stories that stick in my head are the people who want to be the youngest one to sail around the world. I remember this particularly well because I had an argument about it, and I wrote a blog. In 2012, there was a young Dutch girl, Laura Decker, who was 16 at the time. She had been born on a sailboat. She had sailed extensively. By the time she was 13, she had soloed, done short trips on her own. And she really wanted to be the youngest person to sail around the world alone. And the Dutch authorities fought her relentlessly, but they eventually relented, and they let her go off on the trip. But like Mike was talking about earlier, this was very contextualized in a family that was very into sailing, parents that supported her, and this wasn't something that was imposed on her. This is something she herself wanted to do. And I remember it especially because I wrote a blog post about it at the time. This was in 2012. And at the time, I knew a gal who was a professional child psychologist, and we got in an argument about it because she straight up said, this is child abuse. And I tried to contextualize it in the same way Mike was talking earlier. No, this isn't something that's been imposed on her, but there's going to be a certain contingent of people. And like I said, the gal I'm talking about was a professional child psychologist. She has the kind of, forensic power to be able to go up to the court and say, no, this shouldn't happen. This child should not do this. I don't care if the parents want it, the child wanted it. We as the society, we have to put the kibosh on this. And I think you would see, obviously I don't have any numbers in front of me, but I think you would see as the child's age goes up, and as the difficulty of the thing goes down, that the public pressure is going to shift toward allowing the governmental apparatus to let these things go forward. So if you took a really young child and a really difficult thing, if you took a 9-year-old who said they wanted to do an around the world solo cruise, I think a lot of people would be opposed to that. When you start getting to a girl who's 16, and in the ancient world, kids were adults at 14 or 15. I mean, this is not a big deal. So if you take a teenager and you bring down the difficulty of what they're going to do, you would see less and less opposition to it, I would guess.
Yeah. Well, I have a 16-year-old at home, by the way, and they definitely have their own ideas about things. Yeah.
Yeah. So once we start getting into the 16-year-old age, like that's a whole different ballpark. That 16, they're very clear on their ideas, and if they've been working on something for all these years, like Alyssa, then that's a grown up. I understand that there's life experience that is going to mature them and make them even better and more effective as people, but that's not to negate the success as human beings that they have achieved and demands respect. Like right now, it's interesting. Alyssa is working on flying in a MiG. Like she's doing the training. She's the first under 18-year-old person to complete the Possum at Astronaut 0G training. And now she's working on on writing in a MIG that requires extensive training and all kinds of special permission.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I mean, at 16, you know what I was doing?
I'm not sure I want to know.
I was trying to figure out how to get. I mean, I was buying comic books. Really, that's really what I was doing. I was into comic books. 16, I remember clear as day. That's what I was into. That's what I was doing. I was not learning how to fly a MiG. And that there's a it's like there is a it's we think of things on a line, like, so you have the comic book reading 16-year-old and then you have the MiG flying 16-year-old on the far end, and it's a little different than that. It's almost like people develop and we have to gauge them in this way, not necessarily chronologically, but in a different way of identifying potential candidates for this opportunity.
It's almost like it takes all kinds to make a world.
No, it doesn't really. We just have all kinds.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. And there are really advantages to doing this. Not only do kids get to say, "Hey, I can do that," grown-ups get to say, "Hey, you can do that."
Okay, but obviously, the grown-ups are enabling this, or it's never going to happen, right? So, there is no 16-year-old who can build their own rocket and go into space. There's no 36-year-old who can do that. So,
well, it's funny. There, a 16-year-old, on the other hand, could put together a Kickstarter, and this is one of the things I've talked with a couple of these kids. They could put a Kickstarter together and campaign. Like I said, I have explained. Okay, you've got the skills. You have the prerequisites which merit the respect necessary to be considered for this role. Now you got to get people's attention. And so if what it takes to get someone's attention is to put together a crowdfunding of $250,000, which is what it costs to fly on one of the suborbital tourist flights, then that may be what it takes. But again, that's different if a student is doing that as opposed to my dad owns the spaceship company, my grandfather owns it, so I'm flying on it. Like that then does the thing which I think that this will do for all of us. It will inspire.
okay. I still think I still feel like we're kind of dancing around the central issue, though John's brought it up. Is that culturally, are we ready for this? And when I say we, I mean it's kind of a U.S. centric question, but is anybody ready for this?
Maybe.
No, I don't think culturally we are. Yeah, and the reason is that everybody needs to feel like they have the last opinion, it seems like, on everything. And so there will be an army of child psychologists, or, start there and work your way down in terms of education and experience, but people with very strong opinions that this should not happen for reason X, Y, and Z. And so that would make, if this were a nationalistic goal, that would make it totally untenable. There would be lawsuits, federal courts would be jammed up. NASA, or even probably SpaceX, are not going to put underage children into space. Now, maybe Richard Branson or Jeff Bezos can get away with it if they have family members that they want to put up. But right now, I would say it's probably not feasible. That's my opinion.
Well, Jeff Bezos has 3 sons and a daughter adopted from China, or 4 kids altogether, I think. So he's younger than I am. But what if one of his kids says, "Dad, it's my dream to go up on New Glenn, or even new Neil Armstrong, whatever they're calling that vehicle. You think that might happen? You think that might, just because, I mean, it might take a billionaire who's willing to let his kid take a risk.
I think most self-made billionaires are very practical and serious-minded people, and that I don't know how old his hypothetical son is.
He has 3 sons,
but
I think they're all kind of like they're not little, but they're pretty young.
I mean, from what I've known of self-made wealthy people, he would probably, I would predict, say something like, well, when you have your engineering degree and you've worked at the company for a few years, then we'll talk.
Yeah, well, he is working for he is putting $1 billion of his own money into Blue Origin every year. So
yeah, well, his high school girlfriend has said that, he probably started Amazon so that he could build his space company. So this is the richest man in the world's personal goal.
Right. So then if you
have a personal fleet of rockets.
So if you are a student and you want to go to space, send a letter to this owner of the space companies. Make your case. And in the way that these people would line up to defeat you and stop you, well, God, don't get used to that, because that's life. And you bear in mind that your success may not be to get to space. It may be cracking the door open for someone else. That's important. Do you guys know who Robert Lawrence is? He was chosen for the black astronaut. He's an astronaut. He was black. He was chosen for the Apollo program, or I think may have been Mercury, and he was chased out after Kennedy died for racism. It was like we don't want you here now. But because he was there, it opened the door for Guion Bluford, and Mae Jemison. So the first ones may not get to the launching pad, but that's okay, because it. And also, here's another thing. This is interesting. I mean, this is relevant. Here in Key West, we just finished an amphitheater and a city hall, and the fight to build those two things was epic. It went on for the amphitheater went on for over 10 years. People were saying we should use the ground in a different way. There was just art. It just went on and on and on, and the people just kept on, who had faith in the idea and believed in it, in both ideas. The city hall was about repurposing a building that had been on the island for almost 100 years. And the people who were championing it believed in the importance of that building, the importance of that building to our cultural heritage. And they fought and fought and fought. And my goodness, there's a funny saying, first they hold on, I got to look it up because it's so good. First they laugh at you. I think it's first they laugh at you, then they fight you.
I think it's first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
Then you win. First they.
That was Gandhi.
Yeah.
Oh, that was Martin Luther King, but you might be right.
I think many people have repeated it. Many people who view themselves in being involved in a great struggle take this point of view.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Now tell me that doesn't apply to this.
Absolutely,
it probably does.
And when kids go to space, the advantage is for all of us. And you know what? The funny thing is, I just happen to be one of those grown-ups who remembers distinctly what it's like to be 10 and how I felt about space. And even though I was reading comic books at 16, it was because I was reading science fiction when I was 10. And it was because I was going outside and looking at the stars. And it was because of having my first telescope. The awe and the wonder. And can you imagine what it would be like for a child to look out of a spaceship and see the Earth?
There's no question that it would be great. And if it's pulled off successfully, it would be a really big deal. That would be putting it mildly. I wish I could remember the source. I was reading something just in the past couple of weeks about the decisions both on the side of the Americans and the Soviets going to the moon. And if the first moon shot had been a disaster, that would have been not only the death of the guys involved, but it would have been a terrible blow to the U.S. reputation in the middle of the Cold War. And one of the source I was reading that I can't recall was suggesting that the Soviets held back on their moon mission precisely because they didn't think their hardware was ready, and it might have been a disaster, and they couldn't have weathered that scale of a PR disaster at that stage in the space race. But if you pull it off and things go great and you have a triumphant a ticker tape parade in New York City afterwards, yeah, that's quite the event that goes in the history books. It's that percentage of possible failure that's going to bedevil the whole effort.
Well, we got to, I don't want to erase I think I was looking at the like Paul Hildebrandt is here, and we've taken up this whole conversation. The reason I invited Paul is because he is doing that movie. He's kickstartering a movie. He's already successfully crowdfunded the Fight for Space movie. And the funny thing is, it plays into what we're talking about here. The Fight for Space movie was about how we pursued these amazing, almost unattainable goals and attained them. We went after them, and then we just gave it up. And then, like, reminding everyone that this is what we did, and this is what we're capable of, and this is what we're not doing, and this is what we stand to lose. And that was Fight for Space. And then, he can talk about this better than me. And then his new film, First to the Moon, is that moment, Nick. And I think in the movie, one of the astronauts says there was a 1 in 3 chance of success or something like that. Or there was some quote like that, Paul?
Yeah, Bill Anders said that.
What?
So let me just I can tell you about Fight for Space here for just a minute, and then I'll go into First to the Moon. So a couple years ago, I went on Kickstarter because I was frustrated after I was frustrated after the cancellation of the Constellation program, because I thought we were going to go back to the moon. Ended up we didn't go back to the moon because that program got canceled. So I wanted to make a movie called Fight for Space, and basically found out how really screwed up everything is, and how every 4 to 8 years a new plan comes up, and we try to do it, and then it gets canceled, and then back to vision for space exploration.
Every 4 to 8 years, did you say? 4 to 8?
Yeah, depending on presidents and so forth.
Got it.
George H.W. Bush tried it with the I can't remember the proper name for that now, but the 1991 Mars Initiative.
Space Exploration Initiative, yeah.
Space Exploration Initiative. They thought we were going to, during von Braun's era, they thought we were going to be on Mars by 1985. We weren't, because Nixon wasn't interested, so they scrapped Apollo. We built the space shuttle, and so on. Everybody knows the story. So that's all on Fight for Space. If you'd like to watch it, it's on Amazon Prime. I would encourage you to go see it. If you're a Prime person, it's free for you to watch. So now I'm making another film called First to the Moon, which is basically about Apollo 8. Everybody knows Apollo 8. It's the mission where they took the Earthrise photo. It's the first time that humans ever actually left the Earth. We're not talking about Earth's orbit. They left Earth's orbit. They went to the moon for the first time, and looked back to Earth. And that photo sort of changed everything. It really kickstarted the environmental movement. It got people thinking about the planet in a way that they hadn't thought about it before. And today, I think that's extremely relevant because no matter what side of the aisle you choose to salute to, we live in a pretty hostile world. And I think moving from where we did in 1968, moving forward as a society, I see signs that we're starting to move back as a society now. And I think it's that lack of perspective that Apollo 8 gave us that we're missing today. So I interviewed the 3 astronauts, spent a couple hours with each one of them, and the film was about their lives and the mission and the year 1968 itself. And
The
we're trying
3
to raise...
astronauts from Apollo 8, they're all alive.
That's right, yeah. Frank Borman is actually the oldest astronaut alive at the moment.
Cool.
He's older than Buzz Aldrin? How old is he?
Yeah. He's 90. I think he's 89. Is he 89 or 90? I believe.
They were born in the 30s.
He's 89. Yeah. Born in 1928.
Wow. So there was that quote about what they thought their likelihood of success was. Like,
well, these, Bill Anders mentioned that he thought they had probably 1 chance in 3 of having a successful mission. And he told his wife that, and they all told their wives that, but it was their job to beat the Russians to the moon. And these are military men, some from the Navy, some from the Army Air Force at the time. And this was what they wanted to do. So they accepted it and moved on.
Let me just break in real quick. We have 4 viewers live. If you have questions for Paul Hildebrandt or comments or about anything we've talked about tonight, you go on the chat and I'm watching that, and we'll try to field your questions. So go ahead. I know Mike Bowler is one of the 4, but I don't know who the other 3 are. So
Lovell and Anders. Oh, you're talking about the...
yeah, Lovell and Anders are watching us right now. Okay, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know where we left off. But anyways, my sales pitch here is trying to raise money to finish the film. We've already filmed it. We've interviewed the astronauts. We filmed the capsule at the Chicago Science Museum. I filmed the inside of one of the prototype capsules at the Seattle Museum of Flight. So we have a lot of really cool footage. We just need funds for music, animation, and archival film. And then once the film is all done, we're going to be putting all of the footage that we capture from the National Archives, that's going onto archive.org for free, so other people can use it to make space films and advance the cause.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know archival footage costs money. You have to actually pay for that, or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can go to the National Archives and you can sit down at the tables and they'll pull the films for you and you can look at it. But if you actually want to use it, it's all 16 millimeter film, and you have to send that to a special preservation lab and pay thousands of dollars to have it scanned.
Oh.
And there's only 2 labs that can touch preservation material. So that's what all the money's for.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah. So I actually have some stuff. If you go on archive.org and you search for Paul Hildebrandt, I have about 12 films up there right now that I've already uploaded in the raw, sort of ProRes format, all 1080 of original NASA films that you can free to use.
So when you're talking about the Earthrise photo and the impact that this had, the unexpected impact of the Earthrise photo. That's
right. I mean, they went to the moon. They went to the moon, but the biggest impact of that mission was looking back and taking that photo of the Earth. They weren't scheduled to take that picture. NASA didn't really think that they were going to see that event. Frank Borman just happened to be turning the spacecraft, and up it came, and they scrambled to get some color film, and Bill Anders took first color photo from that perspective. And after that, people saw the Earth, without boundaries and clouds, and a lot of stuff happened after that. The catalytic converter, lots of things were put into place to try to improve the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So if we send, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mike. I'll get in my pitch for the wow signal later.
if we send kids to space, that is bringing it back. That unexpected bounty of the Earthrise photo is the trick here. It's what is going to happen. And when I said, imagine how awesome it would be to send a kid to space, and how awesome it would be for that kid. But I don't know that anybody really put themselves in that seat and that experience. If Earthrise had such a profound effect on that we changed how we live on our planet globally, what will happen when we send kids to space? What will happen when we look at that same precious planet through the eyes of children? And
as soon as we start sending more people to space, the kids will follow. We got to get something built. We got to get the space launch system built, and we got to get a budget for it, or SpaceX needs to get the Falcon and the Dragon certified, or a Boeing with whatever that thing's called, the Starliner.
Well, I think you're more likely looking at things like the BFR or the Bezos efforts. Because frankly, no kid's going to go up on SLS. They're only going to launch those once a year, if they're lucky, and they're going to cost billions of dollars, each launch.
Right.
You need to get the cost down to where it's more of a routine thing and doesn't require congressional appropriation for every launch.
The first step is to, get us as a country, get us back into space.
Well, that's next year, right? With commercial crew. Yeah.
Hopefully.
I think that it's going to happen.
By the way, I have the Falcon Heavy launch is scheduled for the 6th or 7th of February, and I've got tickets for it.
Oh, have fun. You realize that every time I buy tickets for something like that, it doesn't happen. But
I know
I'm gonna stay well away from it.
I've been lucky. I've been to 3 shuttle launches, and they're all awesome.
Well, I support launches for a living, or I've done that for quite a bit, and I've done a lot of. Oh, not tonight. So back to the hotel. Try again tomorrow.
I went to the Zuma launch, and not the one that went, but when it didn't go. Yeah. And then they postponed it 3 days in a row, and I was just like,
yeah, they are not thinking, oh gosh, Mike Mongo will be so disappointed if we don't launch.
What? They weren't thinking that?
Nope. I tell you what, it's a whole bunch of very nervous people in a room thinking, I don't want to get blamed if this goes badly.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Yeah. And just one boat can make you postpone the launch. So.
Well, you guys, I just wanted to say I really appreciate everybody thinking on this topic tonight. It's dear to my heart. I think it really it's important, and I respect all of you as thinkers, and I appreciate everybody's engagement on this topic.
Okay, so we're going to go around.
Mike,
go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say in support of your idea here. As a society, we're constantly putting kids in harm's way based on the wishes of their parents, basically at this point. I was just sitting here thinking, is there anything that's like space flight that kids are allowed to do routinely without question on a daily basis? And yes, a transcontinental flight over the poles, gets exposed to about as much radiation as anything would be if it actually goes into space. And
Hmm.
actually, maybe a little more because the
no, quite a bit less actually, but yeah.
Paul,
Well,
Paul,
it's
Paul,
true. It's true. Go
can I-
ahead,
can
go
I
ahead, finish.
no, because the polar precipitation of the radiation actually causes more radiation to come down through the atmosphere.
Yeah, but we're
you're in a-
well inside the inner belts, so we don't get the worst of it.
Yeah, okay. The belts are a good point, but what I'm saying is, if you're in a polar orbit, you would see less radiation for that chunk than if you were flying from Minneapolis to Kazakhstan or something. And that's because the radiation that hits the atmosphere coming down in the poles is giving you it's like neutron spallation, and so you get a little more radiation when you're inside the atmosphere because of the stuff that's above you.
Well, yeah, it's really not that bad, but I mean, the risks of spaceflight are in low Earth orbit are far greater than any radiation dose you're going to get. Above low Earth orbit, their radiation dose is a significant factor, but we just don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
we don't really know
But
very
that's a
much
good.
about
That's a
what low
pretty
dose
good.
does.
I never thought about that, John. I have to look into that.
So anyway, the point I'm saying is that, kids are routinely in transatlantic, transpacific, transcontinental airlines. Sometimes they blow up, sometimes they disappear. So as a society, we're already sort of engaged in commercially, routinely letting kids be in harm's way for voluntary reasons.
The flights are nothing compared to the traffic accidents. I mean, they're really
You mean like regular automobile traffic?
Yeah, they're in
accidents?
the noise. Yeah, I mean,
you're much more likely to be killed in a car crash than an airplane crash. I mean, there's no comparison in terms of statistical rates. So just putting a kid in the car is going to be probably far more dangerous than putting a kid in a rocket.
Yeah, and I put my kids in the car thousands of times.
Yeah, and if you don't get vaccinated, and if you have a gun in the house, I mean, there's a lot of day-to-day stuff that we're engaged in as humans that's a lot more dangerous. But I'm saying, if you need something to directly compare space flight to, transcontinental flights.
I had never thought of it. That's an excellent one.
Well,
did you guys hear that?
I would go back. I would actually go back further in time to when people used to pack their children onto transatlantic ships to come to the New World, or when they used to put them on wagon trains to go across the prairie. That there they were taking a lot more risk than we take putting our kids into their booster seats and driving them just to nursery school. So historically, when adults take risks, we bring our children with us, and we will give our lives to protect them, but we cannot assure that they'll be safe.
Well, historically, children used to be put into risks that adults wouldn't take or couldn't take. I mean, in 18th century Britain, very tiny young children were used as chimney sweeps because they could be put down the chimney where adults couldn't go. And there's a really a painfully poignant William Blake poem where he talks about the cries you hear of the young children going down the chimney. And it's heartrending when you know what he's describing is these young children who are, for all practical purposes, sold into slavery by their parents in order to become chimney sweeps. The other pretty awful abuse of child labor in the Industrial Revolution was children going to in the mines because they could fit in places in the mines where adults couldn't go. It's only been since the late 19th century and the beginnings of what we think of contemporary humanitarianism that people have had this protective attitude to their children, really.
Okay. Well, on that cheerful thought, we've been at this for about 90 minutes.
Did you guys see this young woman, Jade Hameister, who's 16, and she gave a TED talk about cross country skiing and about the extraordinary experience, and then it was posted on YouTube, and all these people, like these guys, trolled her like, good job, honey. Why don't you go make your husband a sandwich? And so she just tweeted from the North Pole that she made a ham sandwich at the South Pole, I think.
Yeah, the North Pole is pretty unlikely to be tweeting from.
Be on a ship.
So she tweeted from the South Pole, if I recall correctly, and she had skied for 37 days and 600 kilometers. She said, I made your sandwich. Now ski for 37 days and 600 kilometers and come and get it.
Okay.
Like she owned all those trolls. And this is a 16-year-old. Like it fits right into this whole thing.
Okay. Paul Hildebrandt's got to go, so I thought I'll let him have his last word first.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for having me on the show. I've got a jet.
Okay.
Yeah,
thanks, Paul.
Thanks for keep up the good work. And a reminder, Paul's movie Fight for Space is available on Amazon Prime, so definitely go watch it. And he does have a live Kickstarter right now for First to the Moon, so you can look on that.
Send me the links by email, and I'll put them in the show notes.
Will do. Thanks,
Okay.
Paul.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike. Yep.
Thanks, Paul. Okay. Well, that's one person who's had his last say. Let's see, from left to right of my screen, I have Jon Eckberg. Your chance for one last word, or two, or three.
Well, this has been a mind expanding show. I've honestly never seriously thought about, the concept of how, what's the age of consent for kids in space. As a parent that trends towards maybe a little overprotectiveness, my initial idea was that this is an extremely bad idea, but there's a lot of things that humans are doing routinely, that are more dangerous for kids. There's a practical issue about who's going to pay for these kids to go to space. But it's an extremely powerful concept in terms of getting kids excited about science, technology, engineering concepts. Maybe mathematics. I don't know how many mathematicians actually went on to be astronauts. I think most good mathematicians tend to fly sort of in their own spaces in their heads with much higher dimensions than 3. But, in the same way that the Apollo era, in the United States and probably in the Soviet Union, got a bunch of us into engineering and technical and physics, trajectories for our lives. What you're doing as an educator can definitely have the same beneficial effect for kids. I definitely applaud that. And I don't know, like I said, it's a very expanding concept. Sometimes I watch the Joe Rogan podcast and he gets into some pretty mind expanding stuff, and it's not quite, we're not talking about licking toads here, but it's a pretty good one in terms of opening up the cognitive potential spaces. So that's all I have to say.
Nick Nielsen.
I was going to pick up something Jon Eckberg said, and then my mind just went blank. So
that's a very first, Nick. Like you.
I know my mind goes blank all the time. But I since I can't say the point I was going to pick up on, I'll just say that I'm very sympathetic with what Mike is saying. I remember what I was going to say about a catalyzing moment. What Jon was saying was, talking about the impression that these kind of things could have on people. And that was earlier in the discussion too. After the Sputnik was launched, the phrase was used, the Sputnik crisis in the West, because the Soviets had beat us into space. And there was a real move to improve science education and mathematics education and engineering education in the wake of the Sputnik crisis. So that was a what you could call a negative incentive in the Western world. Then with the Earthrise photo, which we also discussed, you have a positive event. You have a positive catalyzing moment where people see this great inspiring image, and it makes them want to do something, and to strive after more distant and difficult aspirations. So I agree with Mike that a kid in space could be that kind of catalyzing moment, and I'm all for lowering standards of risk aversion. I think our society would benefit from taking more risk rather than fewer risks. And I think the way that it could happen is, as I said earlier, mother and father and child going up together. Maybe Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk could hold a lottery, so it wouldn't be like, as Mike said, a silver spoon kid, and give a family of 3 or 4 a ticket to space.
Okay.
The Robinsons.
By the way, I'd like to mention that Nick was one of the participants in a recent episode of the Wow Signal, where they talked about the overview effect of seeing the Earth from space, along with Danielle DePaulis and author Frank White, who wrote the book, The Overview Effect. So check that out at wowsignalpodcast.com. Yeah, I mean, my own view is that it's not so much that we're too risk averse, as we're just irrational about which risks to take. As we mentioned before, there's 40,000 deaths from car accidents every year in the United States. But there's, we're absolutely terrified of when a small number of people, relatively small number of people, die in an airplane accident. I just think you have to balance the risks. If we all die, the only question is how and when, and so that's something that I think that we should be far more rational about, far more open about discussing, and not making it a taboo subject. And I also think, being a parent myself, I would say that we are overly protective of this current generation of kids, and I admit that I'm one of those overly protective parents. So let's think about that some more. If you want to know more about this podcast, the Unseen Podcast, this is episode 87. You can go to unseenpodcast.com to learn whatever you want to learn about this podcast. It's all there. And if you'd like to be on the panel for an upcoming podcast, the invitations for 88 are already out, but you can get on 89, just coming up in March. And we're always happy to have new panelists. Don't be shy. If you go to unseenpodcast.com, you can learn how to do that. It's really quite straightforward. All you need is some headphones and a Friday night that's not too busy. And if you live in Europe or somewhere else where there's it's not a good time for you, we occasionally do these on times that are more convenient for people in Europe or Asian time zones. So we'd be happy to have you. And we like having a diverse panel. And so that's it for episode 87 of the Unseen Podcast. It is still just barely the 26th of January, 2018. I'd like to thank my panel, Jon Eckberg, Mike Mongo, and Nick Nielsen. And that's it for us. And
special guest, Paul Hildebrandt.
And special guest, Paul Hildebrandt. Yes, thank you, Mike. And good night.